everybody that I'm going to do a small session on Spring Boot with REST API to create a simple CRUD application to create, update, delete, and view all the books in a small application. And before we begin, I would like to explain what Spring Boot is. Spring Boot is a framework written on top of Java, and it's a it's a framework written on top of Spring as well. So the evaluation was Spring. Later on, it became Spring Boot. Spring Boot has to come into play as Spring was too much configuration based, but Spring Boot does allow you to set up a application or a server with very minimal dependencies or startup configurations. So it's almost within few minutes you can spin up a server that's production ready. And to initialize a Spring Boot project, you can use three ways. One is to manually creating a Spring Boot project from the start.spring.io. It's official page given by the Spring Boot community itself. So this will be the page, and here you have to select the language, the building tool, Spring Boot version, and the naming conventions and the basic configuration, the Java version, and then you have to add the dependencies. For us to create a simple REST API application with uh, with the CRUD, we will be only needing the Spring Web dependency and the Lombok annotation library. So which makes us helps us to remove the boilerplate code from our development. So which I'll be showing in a while. So then you have to click generate. It will generate the project, and a zip file will be downloaded. You have to unzip it and open it with your own on project manager. And the second way to spin up a Spring Boot project is to install the Spring Boot CLI and run Spring init dependencies and the name of the project. And for that, you can refer this page. I'll be attaching that Spring Boot's installation. And the third method to do is using either one of your IDEs. So with IntelliJ, you can easily create one with new project Spring Initializer. With Eclipse as well, you can create one with Spring Boot Start project. And another one more thing I would like to mention here is that IntelliJ IDEA is provided by JetBrains. You can get the JetBrains student pack with the SLIIT student email. So make use of that as well. And with that, I'm gonna go next to what REST API is. I'm sure most of you must be already aware, but for a brief introduction, it will be a REST means representational state transfer. So it's a protocol you use in it's a protocol you use to communicate through HTTP. And most of the common methods will be get, post, put, and delete. And there's one more called patch, which also sometimes we use to update. And the difference between put and patch is that put usually when we use it when we are going to replace the record, but patch when we use it when we make a small change of in one of the records. Like if you are going to entirely change the record, the whole tuple in the database layer, then you may go for the put method. But if it's only one column in the tuple, then you can go for patch. That's the basic idea. And you must be aware we use get to read post calls to create something. When we are transferring some data with get calls, you can't append data. Post call, you have to use post for that. And delete, you use it to make some removal data. And the CRUD stands for creating, deleting, updating, and creating, reading, updating, and deleting. And basically that's what we are going to use. We are going to do in this session. And that's about it. I'm gonna use my IntelliJ browser. With that, I'm gonna use the new project and Spring Boot initializer. The name will be Spring Boot Basics, and I'm gonna select Java. I'm gonna go with Maven, and for the group I'll say CSC since the session is done by the CSC, and Java 70 is enough. Java packaging. So the dependencies I'll be using here will be the Spring Web and the Lombok library. One thing about IntelliJ or using any project is that it's so easy to spin up a project or create a project without you having to do any command line command. So anything it does the work, installs the dependencies and does most of the works for us. So basically a Spring Boot project structure is like this. So it's still dependencies are still loading, so we'll give some more time. So as you may know, any project, any application will have some environment variables, and application.properties is the file we use in Spring Boot to record, so to store the environment variables, and it's inside the main folders resources folder. And this is the package structure. So inside the main there is a folder called Java. Inside that we have the packages. So this is the main function Spring Boot uses to spin up our project, to run the project. So we can run it from here as well. So before we go into the rest or CRUD, I'll just go ahead with the run command to see whether things are settled and working fine. And meanwhile, I want to say what I'm intending to do. So yes, start a Spring Boot applications in 5.3 seconds, and the Tomcat server is started as well. So yeah, it's working fine. Right, and as I mentioned, to continue on that I'm planning to create a simple CRUD application with REST API with one structure called books. So we'll have this text file. Inside the text file, we gonna store the set of books, and we are gonna delete it as well. And so we are gonna break it down into two steps. Initially, we'll set up the REST APIs, and then we'll set up the CRUD layer. So usually the standard practice is to create packages inside the last package you are using. So we'll be creating a package called controllers here, controllers, to store the controller layer. So basically how it will be is so initially it will be the controller layer, controller. I'm not sure whether this is visible. Okay, I hope this is visible to you all. So we have the controller layer, and then we will have the service layer where the business logic is residing. Sorry, controller layer is the outer layer. We are going to expose. We are going to write the REST API's structure, and from that the request will go on to the service layer to do the business logics. And inside the service, from service we are going to go to the repository layer to do the persistence of the data. So for an example, if we take up get all books, let's assume this is the method or this is the target we are going to achieve, then in that case it will have an API path. So it will be URL slash API slash version 1 books. So with this we are gonna get all the books from the persistence layer. So initially we'll set up a get request in the controller layer, and the service layer will have the method to get all books, and repository layer will have the get all books from file method. So request flow will initially come to get, then the service folder, sorry, layer, then the repository layer, and it will the response will be propagated till the end user as well. So that's how what we are going to do. We have created the controller layer, and inside that we are going to create a class to get book controller. So as I mentioned, Spring Boot is a auto configured framework. So for that you have to have annotations. So book controller is a controller layer that you and me are aware, but Spring Boot doesn't know it yet. So for us to let it know, so for it to start up or configure its dependencies and all, we have to let it know that this is a controller. So we have the annotation controller from the Spring Boot as itself, but since this is a REST controller, so REST API, I'm going to go with the REST controller. So now Spring Boot is aware that this is going to be a REST controller. This is going to get request. So the servlet is dispatch. There is a call dispatch servlet in Spring Boot. That's the unified entity that's going to get all the requests, but that's a little too advanced concept for you to learn once you are familiar with the basics. So for at the moment, just have an idea that all the requests come to this one particular place, and from there it's being distributed, and likewise. So now we are going to have 4 endpoints. So private, sorry, we can't have privates. It has to be public list of book, get all books. So right, so we are getting an error here since the book is not available. We are going to create a model package to have the structure of the book. I hope it's clear. Let's create it. So for that, we are going to create the package model. Model is going to have book, and book will be having private string ID of the book, title of the book, author of the book, and the publication date. So you may have, assuming you have an idea in Java, uh, you must be already aware that none of these methods are accessible from the outside, from this method, so from this class, because we have made it private and there aren't any setters or getters set for them. So what we can do is we can write public set, so void set id, right, and public int get id, right. Likewise, we can do it for all the variables we have set here. And also we can't initialize this method at the moment since there aren't any constructors being set. So we can do that as well. And this is here, but the main thing I want to highlight here is that we are going to write some boilerplate code here. So we can mitigate that with Lombok annotation library. So you can see this all arguments constructor is given by Lombok. So that means all arguments constructor means the one that I had it earlier, like public book, likewise. And so this is missing, but what right. This all arguments constructor and this method both are same. All arguments constructor is gonna create this boilerplate load during the runtime, so we don't have to explicitly write it. And no argument constructor does the no arguments construct creates the no arguments constructor, which we don't have to do it explicitly. And the method getter write the getter methods for all, and setter creates the setter methods for all the variables. So this is the main use case of the this is one of the use case of the Lombok library. It's a very vast library. You can learn it, and it makes our lives easier when we do coding with SpringBoot. So another small thing I want to mention here is annotation. So these are the things that are called annotations. So we can create our own annotations as well that you can go through after once you're done with the basics. So for your information, just know that Spring Boot annotations means the annotation that starts with the at. Right. Now we are all set with the model book model class. Now we are going to import it here. Yep. And we'll import the list as well. Right. Okay. So with this, we are going to return a list of books. And this is not updated. So, okay. We have imported it. Right. So our method is completed now, but we still can't call it from outside since this doesn't have a path. So all the REST APIs has to have a path to be called. So this method the method is not set, and the URL path is not set either. So what we are going to do is we are going to set this is going to be a get mapping, and it's going to be called with books. So let's see whether this will work. I am getting an error. Please set arguments. Actual and formal arguments is defined with author. So there are some compilations that are happening in my IDE, so I couldn't go ahead with the Lombok library, but anyway, it's fine. We can implement with the Java functions. So I'll be removing that library. So finally the POM looks like this. And I already mentioned that we are going to have a controller layer where we are going to mention, declare the REST APIs. So here, since we are going to do a CRUD application, we'll be having 4 endpoints, and that is also with the model or the object book. So before we proceed with the REST APIs, I'll create the model book. So for that, I'll create a package called model. It could be models as well, but for the time being, model. And we'll create a Java class called book. And now this book class will have 4 fields. One is ID, the title, the author, and the publication date. So we will be persisting these 4 fields of the book. So ID is to uniquely identify each book. And since this is a class, we'll be having the all arguments constructor, get title, the set getters, get author, get, and the set getters and setters are defined. I'll define the default constructor as well. So now this book model is completed. We can do our implementation with this. Now I'm gonna create 4 endpoints. One is to get all the books data. Second one is to get the create a book or so save a book. Third one is to update, and the fourth one is to delete. And get all books will be having get mapping with the path books. It will return a list of books. Book is the model we created. Get all. Now this will return a set of books. I glad we'll have this list that will be returning when the get all books is called. And also I'll quickly write the create method as well. So for that, we'll be using book post mapping. Sorry, post mapping annotation. Sorry, which will be with the identify with the books path as well. But since this is a post method, we can sorry, we can perform both the operations. And this will save the book, save book, and the data of the book will be passed to us in the request body. So request body is the annotation we will be using to get or capture the data from the request body. And for the update part, we'll be using the put mapping. And so if we logically think to update something, we should know where we are updating. So in this case, we are gonna we are going to uniquely identify each book with its ID. So we are going to update it. We are going to update it with the ID of the book. So here we'll introduce a path variable called book ID to identify where we are going to make the update. And also we should know where we are updating. Meanwhile, we should also know what we are going to update. So that data, where we going to update it, what we going to update it will be passed to us from the request body. And to capture the path variable, you have to use the path variable annotations likewise and mention it in the method signature. So this will return the new book object captured from the request body. And we'll also declare the delete method. So we'll be taking the book ID from the path variable to delete it. So here, instead of returning the ID, we'll be returning it with the string that it's being deleted successfully. So this approach is to verify whether the endpoints are working fine, APIs are working fine. We haven't introduced the persistence layer so far. So now let's run the application and see whether this is actually being working. Okay, the survey started. We can create a new endpoint request in the Postman. I'll be using Postman for this. Get all books on local. This is the hard-coded value I had in my controller class, so which is correctly being returned. And I'll also duplicate this. And create other methods as well. Let's see whether the post method is working fine, which is to save book. And for that, we'll have to feed the data in the request body. I'll be choosing the row JSON. ID will be 1. Book title will be title. Book title. Author. Author person. And the published date. 2005. 331 T 12 0. So this has to save. We'll take the book value, publish date. Right. This has to save the book. In the sense, it has to return the value that I passed. So it's correctly being returned. We'll also try the update feature. In the sense with the request body. Updated title. Updated author person. And the date to be 0. So I have to mention the ID. It's currently working, properly working. And the last one is to delete. Here also I have to pass the ID. And sorry, it's not get, it has to be delete. Book ID with 1, delete. Okay, endpoints are working fine. Now we have to do the logic. We have to implement the business logic and the persistence. So for the persistent, we'll be using a simple text file called book.txt. I have some value there, so I'll delete the file. We'll be creating a new file called books.txt, which will save the data we are going to feed. So this method, the save book method, will be inserting records to that file. Update will be updating certain records, and deleting will remove records, and get all books endpoint will return all the data from that file. For that, initially we'll create the service layer, which will have service as the package name. And the best approach to do it is to initially create an interface with the methods we are going to implement. So get all methods will return a list of books. Get all books. And save and delete, save and update functions will return a optional book. So either it will have the value, or it will have the value as the null value. Optional book, update book. So to update, we need the book ID and the book object. And for the delete function, we'll return a boolean which says whether if it's true, it's being deleted, otherwise it will return false. So this will be basically what we will be implementing in the book service implementation. And we'll create a new class that will inherit or implement the book service. Book service. And all of them will inherit the value, implement the values. Okay. Now this being done, we'll modify the controller class to capture the value from the service class. And we'll modify the responses of the control class to respond with optional. Okay, now the controller class is modified. book service implementation. Okay. Now the control class is modified to make the request to the service layer and return the response from the service layer. If you look at the service layer, it has to be mentioned as service with the service annotations and the implementation class as well. So this basically what we'll do the business logic. And for us to do the persistence, we may need another layer called repository. So whenever you are interacting with the database, you will be database or some other persistent techniques you will be using this package repository. Inside that, we'll create an interface called book repository. And of course, we let the SpringBoot know this is a repository class. And it will return a list of books when get all books is called. Book, save book will return a book object. Update book will return a book object. Delete book will return a boolean. So what I'm planning to do here is when you pass the book object, the save book function will save the book. If it's not being saved properly, it will return a null value, which will be captured by the service layer and will be returned as an optional null, which I'll show you in a little while. So we'll implement the repository initially. Book repository implementation. Implements book repository. I have to override the values. Okay, now, so what we are going to do is a very simple thing for us to learn Spring Boot at the moment. So what we are going to do is we are going to have a file called books.txt. And we are going to save our data inside this file. Okay. Now, to get all files, what we may have to do is we have to read the file. So initially I'll create an object called file with the path of the file. So at the moment, since it is inside this directory, it will be books.txt. That is enough since it's relative. And I'll need the object mapper object. And with this, I'm gonna create a new array list. And books will be equal to object mapper dot read value. Read value, the file, and the collection type books list. So this is IO operation, so it has to be wrapped with a try and catch. What we'll do is we'll wrap it inside a try and catch. It will try to read everything to the book. If there's an exception, it will print it and return the list of books object. So this has to work mostly, and let's try. whether this is actually working. So, okay, for this to work, I have to connect the service layer with the repository layer. And for that, I'll create a object of book repository inside the service class. And this will default constructor will initialize the book repository as well here. Now get all books method will return the response from the repository. So initially we hard coded some value and returned them. Now it has to return a empty array. Let's see what it returns. It's an empty array, but we do have an error logged that as books.txt, no such file or directory. Okay, my file is book.txt. So I'll modify it. I'll modify the file to be book.txt. Books.txt. Okay. Now again, let's make the call. Okay, I'll create the console and make the endpoint call. Okay, now it's a different error that mismatched input type in the repository implementation. So the reason why we are getting that error is that there aren't any value actually existing within that text file. So it's empty. So it's trying to convert something empty into a list of books objects. So it actually wouldn't work. So before converting this to mitigate the error, we have to check whether the file actually exists. And if it exists and the file length is more than 0, then only we have to make this conversion. Sorry, make this conversion. Otherwise, we can move forward and return the empty array. Now let's make the call again. And it worked, but there aren't any errors since we captured it with the if else. Okay, now let's modify the save endpoint to save some value to the file. Right here, we'll capture the value from the repository. And save book function will, what it will do is initially it will read all the existing data from the file, and then it will add the book we want to save it to that list. Then we'll write the new list of values to the books.txt file. So here it will return null. If it's being saved, then we'll return the book here. So if it's returning null, it means book is not saved successfully. Save book function will take some inputs and let's see whether it's being saved properly. Endpoint is working fine. Now let's see whether the get all book endpoint returns it. And it returns the file has to be modified as well. It's being modified as well. Now let's save another value to the post with the post call and see the response. And get all books ideally has to respond with all the books that are being saved. Right, it's working fine. Now the save function and the get functions are working fine. Now that we have to modify the update. Update book method will take the book as input, and here also we will capture the response from the repository layer, and we'll check for the null, and if it's not null we'll return the updated book object, otherwise we'll return the null object, null optional. To update, we have to get all the book data from the file with the get all books function we already have, and then we will traverse through each of the book if book id equals to b dot get id, then we will modify the book b object with the values we want to set. Now the B object is updated, in the sense the object we want to update is being updated. Now what we are going to do now is initiate object mapper and write the value to the file. So now we are updating that object and the list is now updated. It's gonna replace the values from the text file. Let's make sure whether that's correctly working as well. And I see an error here. Okay, there is no response, return null. If it's returning null, in the sense there aren't any records being updated. Survey started. I'll make the get all books call once again. Now the book title 2 or the person 2 is there. And for the ID 1, I'm going to update it with these values. Let's see what it returns. And it returns the updated object and whether it's actually updated the file. Yes, the file is updated as well. In the sense, the update endpoint is working fine. And now we'll modify the delete function and take the response list of books and traverse through the book. Book ID equals to b dot get ID. Books dot remove the b object from the list. Now save everything to the file and return true if it's removed, since it's removed, otherwise return false. And we'll update the service layer to return the value from the book repository. Sorry. Okay, survey started now. I have two values. I'm going to delete the second one or the first one. Okay, I will delete the first one. And it says true. Then the first, this record has to be gone now. Right, it's being deleted from the file. And we'll try to delete the book with ID once again. Now it returns false because there aren't any files with ID 1 in the file. So it has to return false. And that's what basically we had planned to do. And these are the 4 endpoints we created. And this is a very basic file structure you can follow. And I hope you understood the session, and thank you for listening so far.